Can I have some leftover food?" The poor girl whispered, her hands trembling as she peeked at the untouched plate, unaware that the man she begged was not just anyone, but a CEO billionaire whose name could make headlines overnight. He looked down at her, the faintest flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, but his next move stunned everyone around. Why did a billionaire pause over leftover food? What hidden past made him hesitate for a simple act of kindness? And what would happen when their worlds, so starkly different, collided in ways no one could predict? Rain streaked the cracked pavement of the city's forgotten alleyways, puddles reflecting the dull glow of flickering street lamps. At the edge of a busy sidewalk cafe, Emma Brooks huddled under a tattered umbrella, her stomach twisting painfully with hunger. Her fingers, numb from the cold, clutched a frayed backpack that had seen better days. She hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. The lines of fatigue etched into her face told a story that no polite society ever cared to hear. Inside the cafe, the warmth and aroma of fresh pastries mingled with the hum of chatter, utterly foreign to her. She watched silently as customers ordered lavish meals, laughter spilling out from behind polished glass windows. She had learned long ago that asking for help was a gamble, often met with polite avoidance or scorn. But today, hunger overpowered pride. "Can I have some leftover food?" she asked softly, almost afraid to disturb the bustling cafe staff. Her voice was a fragile thing, swallowed by the noise of espresso machines and clinking cutlery. The man she spoke to froze mid-step. His tailored navy suit brushed against the marble floor, a sharp contrast to the peeling walls of the alley she had just emerged from. Lucas Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Industries, was known in every business circle from New York to Los Angeles. Yet here he was, staring down at a young woman whose existence hadn't even registered in his high-powered world. His perfectly styled hair was damp from the rain, a rare vulnerability he had never let anyone see. Something in her gaze, desperate but polite, hungry yet unashamed, made him pause. Normally, he dismissed beggars without a second thought. But this time, the hesitation lingered. A flash of memory hit him, unbidden. His mother, when he was 8, handing a warm loaf of bread to a street boy in their neighborhood, whispering that kindness costs nothing but can change everything. Lucas shook the memory away, but his hand hovered above his coffee cup, caught between instinct and the unfamiliar tug of empathy. Emma's eyes darted around nervously. She could see the judgment in the eyes of cafe patrons as they whispered among themselves. She felt the weight of her poverty pressing down harder than the rain, the shame coiling like a snake in her chest. And yet, there was something in this man's hesitation that sparked a fragile hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, kindness still existed in the world. Lucas finally spoke, his voice calm but carrying a strange weight. "Why are you out here in the rain instead of inside somewhere warm?" There was no trace of condescension, just genuine curiosity, a rarity in his life filled with agendas and negotiations. Emma blinked, startled by the question. I don't have anywhere to go," she admitted. Her voice wavered and a small shiver ran through her body. Sometimes people leave food. I was hungry." Lucas studied her closely, noting the dirt-streaked face, the worn-out shoes, the ache in her eyes that mirrored a part of him he usually kept buried. He saw more than a poor girl asking for leftovers. He saw resilience, survival, and an honesty that his boardroom had never demanded. But his life was one of rules, schedules, and appearances. Could he risk crossing those lines for a stranger? Before he could decide, a young barista approached, holding a plate with remnants of sandwiches and a half-eaten pastry. "Sir, The girl trailed off, unsure how the CEO might react. Lucas waved her over with a faint smile, a quiet rebellion against his own carefully curated image. He placed a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder, startling her. "Take this," he said simply. "Eat." Emma's eyes widened, disbelief etched across her features. Are you sure?" Her voice trembled. "I'm sure," Lucas said, the words lighter than any business contract he had ever signed. But as she took the plate, a strange tension settled over him. This act, small, seemingly insignificant, felt monumental. He wondered how a simple gesture could unsettle his world so profoundly. She sat on the curb, savoring every bite as if it were a feast fit for royalty. Lucas watched from the cafe doorway, hidden under the glow of a street lamp. The rain softened, leaving a mist that mingled with the warmth of the cafe behind him. And in that quiet moment, he realized something unsettling. He didn't know what would happen next. Would this girl vanish from his life as abruptly as she had appeared, or was this chance encounter a pivot neither of them could ignore? He didn't ask her name yet, nor did she offer it. But curiosity gnawed at him, sharp and insistent. Who was she? What circumstances had brought her to the brink of hunger and desperation, and why? In a world where power dictated value, did her presence stir something he hadn't felt in years? For Emma, the simple warmth of the food sparked more than relief. It ignited hope, a fragile ember she had long thought extinguished. But little did she know, the man who had handed her a plate of leftovers was a CEO billionaire, a name that could change everything in her life. And as Lucas turned to leave, both of them carried questions that demanded answers, setting the stage for a collision of worlds that neither could foresee. The next morning, the city hummed with its usual chaos, horns blaring, construction echoing off towering glass buildings, and people hustling with the urgency of lives that left no room for pause. Emma Brooks sat on the steps of a small, rundown apartment complex, her plate from yesterday now just a memory, and her hunger once again gnawing at her insides. She tugged her threadbare jacket closer, the chill in the air a stark reminder that warmth had always been fleeting in her life. Her thoughts wandered to the cafe, the moment she had met him, the stranger who had defied every unspoken rule of the world she knew. A CEO billionaire. Handing me food? She muttered under her breath, a mixture of awe and disbelief coloring her tone. She didn't even know his name, yet his image had already imprinted itself into the corners of her mind, like a photograph that refused to fade. Across town, Lucas Mitchell was already immersed in the relentless pace of his empire. In his high-rise office, sunlight gleamed off polished surfaces, casting sharp reflections that mirrored the precision of his life. Emails pinged, phones rang, and assistants juggled schedules with the efficiency of seasoned conductors. Yet despite the orchestrated chaos around him, his mind wandered back to the girl in the alley. He had always prided himself on control, over his company, over negotiations, over the narrative of his life. But yesterday, for a fleeting moment, control had slipped. He remembered her eyes wide with hunger and a cautious kind of trust, and the subtle way she had clutched the plate as if it were more than food. It was proof that someone still cared. A memory surfaced, sharper than he expected. Lucas had ate, his mother kneeling on the cracked kitchen floor handing a loaf of bread to a ragged boy from the neighborhood. Lucas, kindness isn't measured by wealth, she had said softly. It's measured by action even when no one is watching. She had smiled then, a smile that had imprinted on him more deeply than any boardroom victory ever could. He hadn't remembered that lesson until now, and the recollection left a pang in his chest, an echo of the man he could have been if life hadn't demanded ambition over empathy. Meanwhile, Emma was navigating her own battlefield. The streets were unforgiving, a relentless maze of struggle, and she had learned to survive by slipping through unnoticed. But survival didn't erase hunger, and hunger didn't erase hope. She thought about finding a part-time job, anything that could offer a meal and a roof over her head. But every opportunity seemed a mountain too steep to climb. Her past haunted her, abandoned by parents too young to care, raised by distant relatives who resented her existence, and now forced to fend for herself in a city that barely noticed the people on its margins. As she walked through the alley near the cafe, she noticed a familiar figure leaning against the wall, watching the rain dissolve into the morning light. Lucas Mitchell. Her heart skipped a beat. What was he doing here? Did he recognize her, or was it merely a coincidence? Lucas's sharp eyes caught hers immediately, and for a moment both froze in mutual recognition. She tightened her grip on her backpack, unsure whether to approach or flee, the instinct for self-preservation warring with curiosity. I didn't expect to see you again, Lucas said, his voice a mix of amusement and something harder to define. He stepped closer, the rain having left his coat damp but his presence undeniably commanding. Are you okay? Emma hesitated, then nodded, though the gesture felt hollow even to her. I'm surviving, she admitted. There was an honesty in her tone, unpolished, unguarded, a stark contrast to the carefully curated facades Lucas dealt with daily. He studied her, noting the faint bruise on her wrist, the threadbare jacket, the dirt streaked across her cheeks. A flash of anger surfaced. Anger at the world that had brought her to this state, at the systems that ignored hunger and pain. But he swallowed it down, replacing it with a question he hadn't expected to ask. "Do you want a real job?" Emma's eyes widened. "A job?" she whispered. She had survived so long on scraps and odd chores, never daring to imagine a future beyond scavenging for meals. I don't know how—" "You'll learn," Lucas interrupted gently but firmly. "You're smarter than you think, and you're not alone anymore. Not while I can help." His words carried weight, a promise he hadn't made lightly, and yet he felt the risk of attachment threading through each syllable. Emma swallowed hard, her heart racing. Could she trust him? A CEO billionaire reaching out to a poor girl was unheard of, yet the sincerity in his eyes made her hesitate. Something about him felt different. Something about him promised change, though she knew life had a way of crushing hope before it could bloom. Lucas watched her closely, realizing the depth of her uncertainty mirrored his own fears. The collision of their worlds, luxury and poverty, control and survival, was inevitable, yet neither of them fully understood the consequences. How much could one act of kindness unravel their lives? How much could one connection redefine what they thought possible? As the morning sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the rain-soaked streets, both Emma and Lucas stood at the edge of transformation. One step could lead to salvation, the next to disaster, and yet neither could ignore the unspoken bond forming between them, a bond that carried questions, stakes, and promises that neither were prepared to confront. Days passed, and the rain that had soaked Emma's clothes had transformed into the dry, relentless heat of late morning. The city moved on, indifferent to the lives that struggled in its shadow. Yet for Emma, nothing felt ordinary anymore. Lucas Mitchell's unexpected intervention had altered the rhythm of her survival. She wasn't just another hungry girl anymore. She was someone under the watchful eye of a CEO billionaire, and that reality came with its own complications. Lucas had arranged a temporary position for her at one of his smaller companies, a role far from the limelight of boardrooms and billion-dollar contracts. But even in this humble assignment, Emma felt the tension of worlds colliding. The pristine offices smelled of polished wood and ambition, and her worn shoes clicked awkwardly against the marble floors. Employees glanced at her with mild curiosity, unaware of the hidden drama unfolding. She was meant to organize files, answer calls, and assist wherever needed, but for her, every task carried the weight of proving she belonged. Lucas observed from a distance, the CEO persona firmly in place, yet his eyes constantly found her across the office. There was something in her, resilience, humility, and an authenticity that no high-stakes meeting could replicate. He remembered the alley, the leftover plate of food, the way her eyes had reflected both despair and gratitude. Something inside him stirred, a memory of the boy his mother had helped, and a realization that maybe, just maybe, he could influence more than just corporate outcomes. Emma struggled at first, fumbling with unfamiliar technology and office protocol. Each mistake made her stomach twist with shame, yet Lucas's subtle nods of encouragement became anchors she clung to. "You're learning," he would say quietly, never harshly yet never dismissively. He understood that growth wasn't instant. It was earned through perseverance, and in her presence he rediscovered patience, a quality that had eroded under years of power, money, and expectations. Her mind often wandered back to her own past, to nights spent huddled in alleys or under broken stairwells, clutching scraps of food and dreams of something better. She remembered her mother's laughter. The lullabies now faded into the silence of absence, and the day she had realized the world didn't care if she survived. And yet the encounter with Lucas had sparked something fragile but undeniable. Hope. Hope that maybe life could be different. Meanwhile, Lucas faced battles of his own. The boardroom was merciless. Investors demanded results, quarterly profits and strategic growth with a speed that left little room for empathy. Yet he couldn't shake the image of Emma, the girl who reminded him of lessons long buried under ambition. A flashback hit him unbidden, a memory of his father's cold dismissals, the harsh words that had shaped his relentless pursuit of success, and the fear that kindness was weakness. But now, seeing her navigate her small victories and setbacks, he wondered if weakness and strength were not opposites but complements, capable of coexisting in a way he had never allowed himself to explore. One afternoon, As Emma struggled to organize a particularly chaotic filing system, she paused, exhausted, and leaned back against the cubicle wall. Lucas appeared beside her holding a cup of coffee, his eyes softer than she had ever seen. "Take a break," he suggested. She hesitated, then accepted, the simple gesture echoing the generosity he had shown her in the alley. "Why? Why help me?" she asked suddenly, unable to suppress the question. Her voice trembled, a mix of curiosity and disbelief. Lucas hesitated. "I saw someone who needed help," he admitted. "And maybe I saw someone reminding me who I wanted to be." His words were layered, carrying echoes of his mother's lessons, of childhood fears and regrets, and the complexities of a man who commanded billions yet still found himself confronted by humanity in its purest form. Emma's eyes softened, a small smile tugging at her lips. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. Yet even in that warmth, a shadow lingered, questions she dared not voice. Who was this man, really? Could she trust someone whose life seemed so distant, so untouchable? And why did his attention stir something she hadn't felt in years, belonging? As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the office floor, an unexpected visitor arrived, Lucas's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Valerie. She approached with a polite yet firm urgency. "Sir, a reporter called. They've gotten wind of a potential story. A billionaire seen giving food to a homeless girl." Lucas froze. He hadn't anticipated this, the collision of public perception and private compassion. Emma, noticing the tension, looked up curiously. "Reporter?" she whispered. Valerie nodded. "It could make headlines. People will be asking questions about you, her, everything." Emma felt a jolt of fear. Her life had always been private, invisible, and now, without warning, the world could descend upon her. Lucas met her gaze, a flicker of resolve in his eyes. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "It's okay. We'll handle it. You don't have to be afraid." But as the office lights dimmed and the city outside began to glow with the evening rush, both of them sensed the truth. They had crossed a threshold. One act of kindness, one collision of worlds had triggered a chain of events neither could fully control. And in the quiet tension between them, questions loomed larger than ever. How much of this world could she survive without losing herself? How much of his heart was he willing to risk on someone from a life he barely understood? And as night fell, casting both shadows and possibilities, Emma and Lucas stood at the edge of an uncertain path, where hope, danger, and destiny intertwined in ways that would change them both forever. The city's skyline glittered as dusk settled, neon lights reflecting off the wet streets from a recent drizzle. Emma Brooks walked beside Lucas Mitchell through the quiet courtyard of his corporate headquarters, her heart pounding. The world had shifted in the last few days, from a life of scarcity and survival to this strange reality where a CEO billionaire had made her more than just a face in the crowd. But uncertainty and fear clung to her as stubbornly as her worn coat. Lucas glanced at her, noting the tension in her shoulders, the wary vigilance in her eyes. He had been through countless business negotiations, faced boardrooms filled with scrutiny and suspicion, yet nothing had tested him like this, the delicate, fragile act of caring for someone entirely outside his world. Every choice he made now carried consequences far beyond profit margins. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I promised you safety and I intend to keep it." Emma swallowed, uncertain whether to trust the reassurance or fear the exposure. The reporter Valerie had warned about lingered in the back of her mind, a looming threat of public scrutiny. She thought of her past, abandonment, invisibility, the cold reality of streets and hunger. Could this life, this unexpected bridge into wealth and opportunity, survive the scrutiny of the world? Lucas led her into a smaller conference room, private and warm. He handed her a cup of tea, a small gesture that carried weight far beyond its simplicity. "I want you to know something," he began. "I don't do this often, but when I saw you, I saw more than someone hungry. I saw resilience, honesty, and strength. You've survived without help for so long, and that matters." Emma's eyes glistened and she blinked back tears. She had never been seen like this, not by family, not by strangers, not even by herself. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Lucas replied. "Just know that this isn't charity. It's a choice. A choice to believe that someone deserves more than what the world has handed them. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy but comforting. Then the office door opened and Valerie stepped in, tablet in hand. "Sir, the reporter is here asking questions." Lucas sighed. He had anticipated the possibility, yet the reality was still unnerving. But he had a plan, a careful balance between truth and protection. "Bring them in," he said, his voice steady. "But know this, any story about Emma is about her achievements, not just her past." Emma's heart raced. She felt exposed, vulnerable, but also strangely powerful. This moment could define her life in ways she hadn't dared imagine. And yet, standing beside Lucas, she felt a shield, a sense that someone powerful had her back, not in condescension but in respect. The reporter entered, pen poised, curiosity in her eyes. She glanced at Emma, then at Lucas, sensing the unusual bond between the two. "I heard a story about a billionaire seen helping a young woman. Can you tell me more?" Lucas stepped forward, his posture confident, his voice unwavering. "Yes, I did help her, but not out of pity. Emma here is remarkable. She's intelligent, capable, and resilient. My involvement isn't about charity. It's about recognizing potential and supporting it. She's extraordinary, and she deserves the opportunity to show the world what she can do." Emma felt a blush rise to her cheeks. She had never heard anyone speak of her like that. Pride mixed with fear, a cocktail she wasn't sure how to process. And yet, for the first time in her life, she realized that she could belong to a world she had only observed from the shadows. The reporter nodded, captivated, but sensing the boundaries Lucas had drawn. "Thank you," she said, lowering her pen. "It seems your actions will speak louder than any headline." After the reporter left, Emma sank into the chair, overwhelmed by the intensity of the day. Lucas sat beside her, offering quiet companionship. "You see," he said softly, "sometimes the world expects people like you to remain unseen. But the truth is, strength shines through no matter the circumstances." Emma took a deep breath. "I never imagined this," she said, "that someone like you could care." Lucas reached out, a rare gesture of warmth. "People can surprise us," he replied. "And sometimes caring isn't a weakness, it's the beginning of something far greater." They sat in silence, the city alive beyond the windows, but inside that small room, a new world had begun. For Emma, it was a chance to rewrite her story, to step into a life she had only dreamed of. For Lucas, it was a reminder that power without compassion was hollow, and that connection, however unexpected, could reshape even the most rigid lives. Later that evening, as Emma left the office, she paused to glance at Lucas. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. Lucas smiled, a rare softness in his eyes. "No, thank you," he replied, "for reminding me that some of life's most important lessons aren't found in boardrooms or contracts, they're found in moments like this." And as Emma walked into the night, no longer invisible, and Lucas returned to his office, a sense of profound change settled over them both. The billionaire and the poor girl had collided, not with chaos but with understanding, hope, and the undeniable spark of human connection. A spark that would carry them into futures neither could have foreseen, yet both were ready to embrace.